We're live. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. This is Rochelle, the Real Life Carnivore. Happy Tuesday to you guys. For those of you who are just signing on, for a really awesome guest that I'm really excited to share with you today. I'm really excited for him to share his story and just talk about what it's like being a carnivore, being a carnivore dad, and all the things in between. So if you guys have questions, feel free to post them. That would be great. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. You can click the little notification bell so you can be notified each time I upload new content. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Chad. He is also known as Combat Carnivore. He is a husband, a father, and a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How are you doing today, Chad? Nice to have you.
Thank you so much. And I'm doing great. I'm doing great because I'm here and talking about carnivore. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and for you to share your wisdom around this. And I would love for you to start by sharing your story. Who is Combat Carnivore and how did you start Carnivore?
So Combat Carnivore was born because I was able to heal my PTSD along with many, many other health issues, which I'll get into uh, through the carnivore diet. And with a few other things, I call these three pillars, as you can see here: steak, strangles, and stoicism. And that is a way to help veterans and men kind of build a foundation in order to rebuild themselves and not to have something like PTSD end up becoming a life sentence, but something that they can grow and it be a stepping stone to make them a bigger and stronger person. So, Combat Carnivore, I decided was going to try to reach as many men as possible who are suffering from mental illness and let them know that they're not trapped, because that's what I would have wanted when I was at my worst. So, that being said, what was my worst? I had a very strange event happen to me when I was in the army where I almost died, and I didn't think anything of it. Of course, it was like a traumatic experience in the moment, but afterwards, I'm like, oh, I'm totally fine. All right, let's move on. But I started down this deep cycle of anxiety, which spiraled into phobias, which spiraled into some horrible, horrible other mental health issues. Um, just to give an example, the brain fog and the constant push of anxiousness that my body was feeling was so debilitating that I used to beg. I used to literally beg and like pray for an hour of mental clarity. So just give me 1 hour. That's all I'm asking, because it was so persistent.
Mm.
And I would beg and beg and beg. And I remember about 10 years into this whole crapshoot of suffering is when I ended up finding animal-based diet, and then I fasted. And I remember waking up on my second day of the fast with no brain fog, and I was like quite emotional. Um, so yeah, so that event happened where I started spiraling down mentally, and then that started to be accompanied by a bunch of physical um, ailments that were manifesting themselves from A to Z, in a sense of like indigestion all the way to what's coming out the other end and everything in between. And I've been going through all my records in as I apply for disability. I know it's kind of weird just to read everything, but I described it as it was like somebody was pulling barbed wire through my digestive system. Yeah. And so I remember being in a ton of pain all the time, every time I ate, about 3 to 4 times a week. And I used to say 5 times a week, but I decided to be conservative. About 5 times or 4 times a week, I would get acute flu-like symptoms. I would be It was like someone just injected me with the flu, and I would get every symptom, like I said, from A to Z. And I would be throwing up, like projectile vomiting. I'd be having atrocities coming out the other end. And I remember semi-regularly, I would be hospitalized just because I couldn't stop throwing up. And whatever medicine that they had given me wasn't working. So I had to go get an IV and to get me to stop vomiting continuously and repeatedly. And so I was just in a bad spot. And of course, all of that led to a depression because I just felt so trapped. So every digestive symptom that you can think of, I remember being in my 20s and going to all these different gastrologists, and I was getting scopes put in places, scopes putting down places. And I was looking around, and all these places I kept going to were like old people, and I was like young and not healthy, but I was like, trying to be an athlete still and trying to get all this to happen. And basically, my athletic career got put on pause and on hold as a jujitsu guy. I couldn't go and compete anymore. I had to take like a 4-year break in competing. Um, Training, I couldn't even train anymore. Everyone says like to feel better, like go for a walk or go for a run or work out, do some resistance training. Every single time I would try to work out, I would get overheated like instantly and I would have a panic attack. My panic disorder was actually the most debilitating thing because I was having so many panic attacks a day, and each panic attack was like putting me into the ground.
Mm,
It was almost like I would rather die than have a panic attack, and they were happening all the time.
wow.
So it was a mess, and the phobias were so bad that I was basically an adult child. I couldn't drive anymore. I couldn't drive myself anywhere. I didn't like to be alone. I couldn't go into like grocery stores by myself. Like I couldn't just go like run an errand or drive myself to work.
Hmm.
My wife was driving me to work, and at one point my job was like 45 minutes away and drive. And that was I didn't feel like a man anymore. And so yeah, things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. So in that journey, I tried every single diet that you could think of out of desperation. I tried being vegan. I tried being vegetarian. I tried uh, what's it called? Low histamine diet, low inflammatory diet. I tried the yeah, I'm forgetting all the acronyms right now, but basically every diet. I even went to this guy who would specialize. Who's technically a chiropractor, but apparently he had all these certifications and education in diet and anxiety and things of that nature. And
Hmm.
so I even spent thousands of dollars I didn't have to get help. And he put me through this very expensive, like, you're only going to eat this. Here's all these supplements. You have the MTHFR genetic mutation. Yeah. And so, yeah, we did all the testing. I did heavy metal testing. I did the lipid testing. I went to lipidologist. I went to psychotherapist. I went to the whole 9 yards, and no one was able to help me.
Mm.
And then one day on my YouTube feed, I see Paul Saladino getting his butt chewed out by some crazy ladies on a doctor show. The show
Uh-huh.
I is called Doctors.
Hmm.
It was cool because every single time I went to a doctor, I said, I really think my diet was giving me these panic attacks. And I can even relate certain foods to things I would feel for 1 or 2 days later.
Yep.
And they're like, you're crazy, basically. Here's a pill.
Hmm.
And that was kind of disheartening. And I I remember that just kind of led to a more disenfranchised feeling of hopelessness, darkness, pressure, and feeling trapped, that it was never going to get better because my symptoms only kept getting worse. And I had some like ups and downs, but the overall trend was really bad. So I see Paul Saladino. He's up there as a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I can't remember. But regardless, somebody who's working in the psych area. And he is this authority figure saying, like, all this is related to your diet. And that was extremely vindicating because I had been saying that for a while, and I've been telling like my parents that, my wife that, other people around me, but mostly my doctors. I was like, I swear there's like something here in my diet that's making this all happen. It doesn't make sense that I'm having like all these flu symptoms and uh, they were like, well, yeah, it's like problems with your digestion. I'm like, yeah, that's like diet. And so I'm like trying to make all these connections, but I'm just not there. And then following down the rabbit hole with Paul Saladino was the first time I ever heard anybody talk about red meat and a species appropriate diet. And when he said it, it was so clear to me, like, of course, this is so obvious. This totally makes sense, but I had not eaten, I never really ate red meat growing up, unless it was like in a burger.
Mhm.
I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I had steak, you know, and I didn't have the best diet growing up. It wasn't the worst diet for sure, but it wasn't the best. A lot of eating out because I was very busy and active in sports. And then so he's the person who really got me on something that we need to be eating ruminant animals and be following a species appropriate diet. And then I got caught on to fasting from there from a few other people. And then I got on to Anthony Chafee was probably one of the biggest influences. And then Dr. Bart K, Dr. Sean Baker, or I should say Professor Bart K, Dr. Sean Baker, Dr. Kim Berry, and then even like Carrie Mann was like a big motivator for me.
Mhm.
But one of the big coolest guys I ever heard talk was Todd from the Carnivore Cure. And so I really, when I got to go when I was in Wyoming at the beef roundup, it was pretty cool, because in our little community, like Anthony Chafee is like a legend, Steak and Butter Gal Bella is like a legend, and Dr. Sean O'Mara. So it's like cool to see those in like a starstruck kind of way. But hanging out with Todd was actually one of my favorite parts of it. And so I connected with Todd, and now Todd and I run this Iron Sharpens Iron for men's mental health. But so yeah, I'm just kind of recap everything. So anyway, I found all these people and they talked about how they went carnivore, how they kind of went more full lion. And once I started doing those things and fasting, like I said, I went into a fast, and that was the first time I wasn't in pain. That was the first time I didn't have brain fog. Um, I was like a little bit anxious, but still nothing compared to what I used to be. In fact, it was one of the first times I felt like calm in a sense where I'm like, something horrible isn't going to happen right now. And I'm just sitting there getting emotional. And my wife, she got more emotional than me. My wife hijacks whatever emotions I feel like. If I'm feeling like any sort of thing, she takes it and like amplifies it. But she was so emotional because I was so emotionless for so long.
Yeah. She was like your megaphone for whatever you were experiencing that you couldn't.
Yeah,
She was expressing it for you.
it was. And so I was like, because I had been telling her, like, I'm like, Jade, I'm like begging for some relief. I'm begging for this pressure to step off of my chest and who I am. And um it was kind of scary because I was definitely suicidal. I suicidal ideations, not I wasn't actively seeking. Um, like I was actively trying to commit suicide, but I would try to plan ways in which I would die. And what's funny is like I was like terrified of flying, but after I got to the suicidal point, I was flying a lot at the time. I was like, well, if the plane goes down, like at least my pain and suffering will be over. And so like then I wasn't like scared of flying, which was really weird because like one phobia just kind of like got wiped out by the fact that I just didn't really want to be alive anymore.
Yeah.
But I was also like scared of dying in a weird sense. But I was like, man, if I just really, really quick, like stepped in front of that car, I bet it would be over really quick. I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. And so it was
Mhm.
kind of like those suicidal ideations, but um now I don't feel those at all. I guess my kids really kept me going, and my wife, and just being strong, and my what this is something I don't talk about a lot, but my wife was actually suicidal and going through a lot of postpartum and a lot of uh manic depressive bipolar disorder, PMDD, and a litany of other things, and she was kind of going through hell as well. So both of us were kind of just this crap show dumpster fire of insane in how would I say this? Uh Incompatibility. It's like how did we survive that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how
And
many kids do you guys have together?
for
4. Mhm.
so anyway, when I felt that when I felt that waking up on that second day fasted with no brain fog and feeling calm, I started to cry because like I said, I've been so emotionless for so long and my wife knew how much we were both suffering. She just was like completely I don't know what's like what's the word I'm looking for? Cathartic? Would that be the right word? But yeah, she was just completely just letting everything go and she was so excited. And I remember that motivated me even more because I knew how much of a burden like we were on one another from our we were like both heavily codependent like leaning on one another. So I was that was like the first sign like I'm definitely on the right track. I don't know exactly everything, but I know this is the right path. And just being on the right path was the biggest relief I've ever felt to get a sense of positive movement and to see how much it affected my wife. So
It sounds like
that
it
being
was freeing.
well, yeah, it was extremely liberating. And so that from that moment on, I just dedicated myself to understanding fasting, to understanding nutrition, to understanding diet, to understanding nutrients, to understanding as much biology as I could. I have a background in higher education in math and physics. So it was funny because I had talked smack about biology, and chemistry, but now I ended up trying to learn as much as I could about it, barely surviving biology and chemistry in college to like now really, really diving into it. And so, yeah, I know that's a lot of talking, but just to say that I dedicated myself at that moment to animal-based lifestyle, and that turned carnivore, and that turned lion, and that turned into fast priming and fasting, and that turned into me realizing basically that turned into me to becoming a conspiracy theorist about the drug companies, the food companies, the insurance companies, and a whole lot of other industry that is just propagated on lies and corruption, manipulation, and trade for our health and well-being. And so I see all the vegans, I see all the plant-based movement, I see all the propaganda for food and the commercials, and I was like, I can't sit back and do nothing. I know there are plenty of other people like me who are suffering and they don't know why.
Yeah.
And the answer is very simple. It's the food that you're eating. But even for me who suffered for 10 years horribly, I didn't I kind of got a gist that that was the answer, but I was looking for the fix. I was looking for the medical fix. Like I was broken and that I needed somebody to repair me. But then I started to learn that no, this is unnatural. To be overweight is unnatural. To be with brain fog, to have this anxiety, have PTSD, this is unnatural because why is it unnatural? It's because you are doing something that is unnatural. There's a external environmental pressure on you or influence on you that is causing this unnatural response to your body. So I started becoming like, what is the source of this issue?
Mhm.
And so between being in jujitsu and between having a practical life philosophy such as stoicism and going carnivore, I was able to achieve um, that that thriving state that a lot of these carnivores talk about, where I'm an athlete now. With all my phobias of not even being able to be alone, I was able to travel to Brazil. Um, I was able to, learn a new language, go to the heart of Brazil and earn my black belt and test for my black belt. And I was there for almost 2 months. I was in some dangerous neighborhoods, learning new languages, figuring things out. And if you know anything about how bad my mental health issues were, you would have known that was an impossible task for me. And
Mhm.
so it sounds, I mean, that sounds pretty, I guess, like a big task for anybody without anxiety to do something like that. But with anxiety, with the phobias, with the debilitating brain fog, and with the debilitating panic disorder, to go from somebody who is basically crippled mentally and physically, and to put myself into a different continent in a different language and do all that was really it showed to me like, yo, I am this person now. I'm not that old person. I'm not. I thought forever my life was just going to be riddled with problems. And now I'm like, no, I'm like doing things that normal people probably couldn't make themselves do. So that was very exciting. And so uh when I realized how strong I become, I decided to speak up against the voices that are so prevalent online. The vegan movement is so prevalent. The insurance companies, the pharmaceuticals, the processed food companies, the fast food companies, they are all so prevalent. We see so much of it. And once you kind of wake up to that, you start to realize how prevalent it is, how disgusting it is, how manipulative it is,
Mhm.
uh, and how almost demonic and diabolical it is, their movement. And what sucks even more is we're starting to learn that it's a deliberate push. They know what's happening. They know that they're manipulating. We've known that there's been payouts for 50 years plus of the food industry and this quasi health industry.
Mhm.
And it's been propagated by two fierce industries of plant-based movement and the cigarette companies, that even when you decide to make an intentional move about your health, you still are usually funneled down a very nasty path. And
Mhm.
so anyway, that God, I know I'm talking a lot about this, but this I'm very passionate about it. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to take the influence I had in the jujitsu community. I'm going to convert it. So instead of being in combat sports, I became combat carnivore. My fight name in the jujitsu world is Chad the Dad. Um, and I decided to take all that, add carnivore to my pillars, like so to make 3 pillars, and to reach out to veterans because I know how they're feeling, and to reach out to disenfranchised men, fathers, and give them back their manhood, give them back their alpha status, and let them know, hey, this is where you're at is unnatural. Here are some building blocks to get you back to that state, to become a family centric with a male role model, and to be a leader in the right sense. Because whether you like it or not, men and women, I think, like, whole family households are the best environment to raise children. I think to raise children is the most important thing that you can do. And I think we need male leadership and female leadership that cooperate and synergize rather than are battling and competing. And so anyway, this is who Combat Carnivore is. It's a dad who went through hell and came out of it, found the answer out of it. And all I want to do is be a voice against, and a push, and uh, a promoter that's just at least going up against the losing battle that we're in right now, I feel like.
Well, and I would definitely say it's a battle. And I like what you said, male and female leadership working symbiotically, because I mean it's been that way since the fall of Adam and Eve, and God's God's curse on Eve was that she would have pain in childbirth and that she would have desire for her husband. And that doesn't mean like sexual desire. It means she would desire his position. She would desire to dominate him. And so I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that, because men have been under attack, with like the feminist movement and all that sort of thing. And I can say that as a former feminist. Men have been under attack. They have been emasculated. They have been demonized. They have been put through things that I don't think they should be put through. And I'm not saying there's, you know, anything wrong with dads that are working at home and stuff like that. I think that's great if you can be at home with your kids, because I agree with you that raising children is one of the most important tasks and blessings that you will ever have. But I also think that men need that purpose, right? Like your purpose as a man is to provide and protect for your family. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're providing and you're protecting. So you're providing this wisdom and this knowledge and the security and the safety for your family. And you're protecting them from the powers that be, the entities that are trying to break up your family. Because yeah, the destruction of the family unit is the primary goal. Because if you're divided, and we talked about this on our last episode, if you're constantly going like this, your wife's going this way to work, you're going this way to work, and someone else is raising your kids, there's a problem. There's a really
Huge
big
problem.
because where is the influence coming in here? So I love that you touched on that. And something I wanted to ask you about, because you kind of danced around this a little bit when you were sharing your story about all of these mental health issues that were going on. How do you think gut health relates to mental health? What are your thoughts on that?
It's all related. The fact that the medical industry started, what's that actor's name? There's I'm
Russell
really
Brand.
upset. I'm forgetting what?
Russell Brand?
Wesley, yeah. I'll think of his name as it goes on, but he kind of had the speech that he got on there that the industry literally creates markets to advertise and sell you things. That's what it is. And so the medical industry is a market. They create different things and they become specialized in those things because that's where the money is. And so they tell you like, oh, that's not my field, that's psychiatry. Oh, that's not my field, that is you need to go to ears, nose, and throat. And not to say that they shouldn't be experts in there, but what's ended up happening is there's no holistic type of health. So when you say is gut health related to brain health, all health is related to all health. We didn't even realize this, but people who were using what they call antiseptic kind of mouthwash increase cardiovascular disease by a significant margin. Women who went on birth control increased their likelihood of anxiety and depression significantly. You know, and so if they weren't related, if I'm just messing around with things that happen in my reproductive area, why is it then that I'm having mental issues? It's all related. It is all related. Skin tags are a relation to your gut health. You know what I mean? But that's the thing is you would go, if you had a skin tag, you would go see a dermatologist. You wouldn't go see a dietitian. And so all of our health is related to everything, and everything is related to what you decide to put in your body. And so the quality of whatever you're putting and exposing your body to, toxins or lack thereof toxins, or thriving, like things that are going to benefit you, like ruminant animals and things like that, there's going to be a huge delineation between the people who are exposed to the environments and the people who are exposed to non-toxic environments and allowed to thrive. And so what is gut health related to other health? Most of your serotonin receptors are in your gut, first and foremost. And we have plenty of studies that are showing right now how many studies are showing that our gut microbiome is directly related to our mental health, right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, and we're learning that the a high variety of, how do I say this? A high variety of chronic health issues, let's say autoimmune disorders, like they all go hand in hand with gut issues. Like the likelihood that you, for example, have IBS and anxiety is extremely high. Like you're more likely, I believe, if I remember correctly, to have IBS and anxiety than rather IBS without anxiety. So these correlations, there we go. There's a word I probably should have used. These correlations are I guess, so unprecedented at this time in order to say, to make the claim that gut health isn't related to mental health would be asinine. Every single aspect of your health is related to every other single aspect of your health.
Yep.
And I think that by isolating it, we have extremely disenfranchised people who need that help the most.
I like that you mentioned the different specialties that doctors have. Like I think about, a couple hundred years ago, there was one doctor in the town or in the village, and he did everything. He fixed your broken bones. He gave you something for a toothache, and he helped you if you were having diarrhea or
Yeah.
whatever. Like if there was something going on, there was one doctor, not this specialist and that specialist, and you have to pay this doctor to get a referral to that specialist, and then that specialist is going to refer you to that specialist, and it's like
Yeah.
nobody's addressing the root cause. And I'm with you. I think root cause 9.9 times out of 10 is diet related. I see this all the time. People are like, "Oh, I'm iron deficient. I'm B12 deficient. I can't handle the sun. I'm depressed. I have mood disorders. I can't sleep at night." And I'm like, when your list of symptoms gets beyond the number of fingers you have on one hand, that's alarming to me. It means to me that our bodies are so in such a state of dysbiosis that they're just not able to function optimally. And it's like at that point, your body's kind of going into preservation mode. And it is going to affect things like your brain, your hormones, your digestive system, your ability to interact and feel like a normal human being. And I guess that's the question nowadays. It's like, what is normal? What is
Yeah.
normal? It sounds like the norm is for people to have some sort of autoimmune disease or to have some sort of, diagnosis that is their death sentence. And I say that all the time because a diagnosis is not a death sentence. It's a warning. It's a warning that you need to get your crap together and start looking at areas of your life that you have neglected looking at and start making changes. And it can be as simple as changing your diet, which I mean, to me, it's so simple, it's so basic, but for most people, the thought of having to change is so scary. They're like terrified that something worse might happen. And I'm like, yeah, but you have nothing to lose at this point because you have Hashimoto's, you have, diverticulitis, you have whatever. Like you have all of these. Hey, Todd, you have all of these awful things going on in your body, and it's like you don't want to do the little things that could potentially make a difference. The other thing, detoxing your environment. Stop using Lysol and Clorox. Stop sterilizing your body with like you were talking about using antiseptic mouthwash. There are necessary good bacteria in your mouth that need to feed certain things in your mouth in order for your digestive health to be optimal. And if you have poor oral health, chances are you're going to have poor mental health, poor digestive health, and poor overall physical health. Have you watched the documentary The Root Cause? I'm just super
N-
curious.
No, I haven't, but
Okay,
sounds good.
I'm going to send it to you.
All
You're going
right.
to it just kind of fills in the gaps for a lot of people. And I'm not here to talk about dental diets, but I will say, since going carnivore, my dental health has improved significantly. My mental health has
Yes.
improved significantly. My gut health has improved significantly. I reversed all the diagnoses that doctors tried to label me with. Um, and I'm like you. I want to just advocate for uh, this way of eating because it's so healing. And I hear people all the time, yeah, well, I went vegan and it helped me with this. And it's like, that's great. I'm glad you found what's working for you. At least you're willing to try something. And I think veganism is a doorway to carnivore because I went
It
vegan
is.
for like 6 months.
It's
I
the
felt,
gateway diet.
yeah, and I felt good, but I didn't feel great. And I had to eat so much food. They're like, "Oh, you have to eat, 2 cups of legumes to get this much protein." And I'm like, "Holy frick, man, I can't eat any more of this. Like, I'm just a walking fart bomb. Like, this is disgusting." But and my husband said to me, he said, "I think you should go back to eating meat." And I asked him why, and he said, "Because I was nicer." And I was like, that really put things into perspective for me because I was trying to shove away my craving for meat, my desire to eat meat, my love for meat. Because I mean, I grew up eating wild meat. I love meat, but it's just so interesting to me how it's like you said, it's just such a broken system that's trying to break people down and then give you, what do they call it? Weimar problems create Weimar solutions.
Yeah.
It's like we'll create the problem and then we'll offer you the solution. Like,
Yeah. They
hello.
offer you they sell the bullets and the band-aids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know many Band-Aids that can help a bullet hole. I really
But
don't.
that was a quote from, I want to say, Ice-T,
Okay.
that he was just saying that it was just it was in context, and it's kind of become a semi-famous quote that he said, that he's just realizing that the people who are selling the solution are the ones who are providing the problem.
Of course.
And there's also a quote in there that's like, if you want to run away from God, the devil will always provide a ride.
Of
And
course.
so
Of course.
you had talked about earlier, which is very interesting. So I was reading the Old Testament, and I'm not a I'm just putting this out there. I'm not a literal Christian. Like, I don't interpret the Old Testament as literal, and a lot of people do. And I'm just saying this because I believe in ancestral appropriate diet, and I believe that our ancestry was built over millions of years. And but I still love the truth of the Bible. So they can kind of go hand in hand, in my opinion, and I get in a lot of trouble for saying that. But I'm trying to be as authentic as possible, so I'm not trying to hide who I am. Um, but when we read the Old Testament, I was just reading through the Old Testament a little bit more, because I just noticed the more I understand this world, the more the Bible makes sense to me, in a sense of what it was trying to portray. And so I was like, you know what? When I was a kid, I read the Bible cover to cover. Uh, and I was like, I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to read one chapter a day, and it's going to take probably, a few years, like it did when I was a kid. And I would have had to read the Bible. So, what's very cool is, like, just in the first chapter of Genesis, but also as it gets into there, do you know how he talks about the animals of the world?
Mhm.
He makes it very, I'm reading the King James because for various reasons, but he basically he calls everybody a creeper, or like are not a creeper. What's the word I'm looking for? Where you're like crawling on the ground to creep. Yeah, the creep things that creep on the ground. And then he also makes a distinction between beasts and
Yep.
cattle,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so he's this cattle is for man, and all these other beasts are going to be for man. He's talking about this. And then he talks about the plants, and he says, I provided basically these seeds that produce other seeds. And then right after that, he says, for the cattle. So, like, even the plants that he has provided us, and the fruit that has been provided for us, it was not for us, it was to feed the cattle. They always needed enough food to feed the cattle so they could eat the cattle. And so that was the reason why they got involved in, like, the agriculture, kind of in that sense originally, was so that their food had food. And as long as their food had food, they had enough food. And so I think back to Ron Swanson from what's that show called, Parks and Rec, and he goes, "That's my food's food," and it's so true. That's literally a biblical reference. And God, like, think about this. It's implied that Adam and Eve were immortal, and when they ate from the tree of life, or the tree of knowledge, rather, sorry, uh, they were condemned. Like, meat was the preference. When Cain and Abel both made offerings to the Lord, uh, the offering of meat was much more, was, what's it called, preferable than the offering of oil and plants.
Mm.
And you can see this reoccurring motif, that the sacrifices to God, the best sacrifices to God, were animal based. And then you start to try to get to that background of, why did you sacrifice animals? And I started to look into that history, and it follows that you had to offer certain things to the people who protected you, in a sense that if you had land, or you had a pasture, or you had a bunch of sheep or something like that, you asked for protection. And so the king, who had the army, was like, I will provide you protection, but you have to pay a tax. And so I don't have anything besides my lamb, my goats, my whatever. And so then you had to give him, so you had to sacrifice part of your crop, or part of um your livelihood, to the king, or to whoever was protecting you. And so that was a sacrifice. And so one of those things that we see is to sacrifice animals to the god. That was the best sacrifice that you could make. God, the kings and everybody preferred to get animals because animal was like the top of the list. Those are the king's hogs, and that's why they call it the king's deer and things like that. It's like you better not hunt it because that's the king's. And so it makes sense that you sacrifice the thing that's the most important to you, right? And back then it was virgins
All
and
the things of
animal
most
meat.
value, the things of
Yeah,
most,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And so all the way back to our ancestry and to the origins of the Bible, literally to the genesis of the Bible, is showing that we weren't really designed to eat plants. And when we did, it cursed us. And also a side note, we like to think that it was the apple, you know what I mean? But apples have only been genetically modified to be edible in the past couple thousand years. And so in the time of Adam and Eve, apples probably weren't around. And as a matter of fact, the most earliest depiction of Christian iconography and art shows it as a fig. And there is a Latin phrase.
I think it was more likely to be a fig than an actual apple.
Yeah, exactly.
But they call it in most versions, older versions like King James Version and New King James, it's usually referred to as the fruit of the tree,
Yeah,
not the apple, the fruit. But
exactly. So,
an apple because I think their brain just automatically kind of diverts.
well, they probably there is an idiom in the Roman times, I believe, that talk about the apple of life.
Mm,
And so that's most likely where we started depicting the fruit as the apple of life and so on
yeah,
and so forth. So anyway, like even then what we view as an apple or what we view as a fruit is very different than what fruit was like back then, and a fig is very different than what most people consider a fruit to be. And
yeah,
so anyway, that's just all to say as I'm reading through Genesis, there's so many things in there that like even promote an animal-based diet. So whether you're coming from an evolutionary background or you're coming from a religious background, they all support this idea that we are designed to eat meat
yeah.
and we are been provided to eat meat, and all the plants that we've been provided with were either for our animals or as survival food.
Yeah, and I would play devil's advocate here too because there is the section in the Bible in Daniel when they relied on eating vegetables for that period of time, but it wasn't because vegetables were superior. It's because they didn't want to eat the items that had been sacrificed to idols in honor of God, and so God took care of them, like you said, providing protection. God took care of them and he actually, improved their appearance and fattened them up and stuff like that. God can use anything to kind of, move his agenda forward. And I will say also in the New Testament, because of all the old covenant laws, like all the Jewish laws, like, you shouldn't eat of the swine because it's a dirty meat and all that kind of stuff. And I know some people still abide to that, and that's totally your choice, your call. I eat pork, only bacon. I don't eat any other kind of pork, but I do eat bacon. There's a section in the New Testament where a carpet rolls out from heaven, and all the four-footed and split-hooved animals and two-footed animals and birds included are presented, and there's a voice from heaven that says, "Arise, Peter, kill and eat," because he was fasting and he was weak and he needed to eat meat. Like the Bible is very clear: man cannot live on bread alone, and also that, in my opinion, this is just my opinion about this. I think that God's original design for food, whether it be grains and fruits and meats and whatever, I don't think those things were inherently bad. I think it's what man has done to manipulate those things that has made them so intolerable. Like, look at the celiac disease emergence in the early 2000s. It was right around that time where they started genetically modifying wheat to make it resistant to molds and mildews and pests and this and that. And all of a sudden, people can't tolerate it. You can't tell me when you find, and I'm not arguing for a vegan diet or anything like that, but it's just like the mentality behind it. Like, you can't tell me that original wheat, uh, you know, bothers people in the same way. I think what
Mhm.
happens is they eat the genetically modified food. It creates inflammation in the body, which therefore creates a sensitivity because your body's reacting to it. And it's like, well, the correlation is that substance made my body react. I should not eat that substance anymore. Anytime that substance comes in, I'm going to flare up, the kind of the genetic coding there. And so that's kind of my perspective on it. I don't know if you have any further thoughts on that, but I would actually be curious to know before I ask you questions about raising carnivore kids. If you have
Yeah,
any
yeah.
thoughts about that.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I think, treating the body like the temple is the true
Right.
temple,
Mhm.
and, this is the only body that we get in this life, and
Mhm.
it's also our filter to existence. We interpret everything through our body, so when our body is sick, we are disconnected from the universe, we are disconnected from God, or whatever your belief system is. We are more disconnected from that connection to our origins, and I I would say that the better you treat your body and get most in alignment with our ancestral gift, as Professor Barquet would say, is like the closer you are in alignment with the way your body was evolved to function or designed to function,
Mhm.
depending on your belief, is the closer you will get to your purpose. And you will start to understand and see signs and understand them more clearly. Uh, and then you were kind of talking about Whole Foods. I think Whole Foods, I would say that Whole Foods are still not a they're still a survival food. I think they're negative inherently for the human body. There's been a lot of case scenarios about people who are on all meat diet, and for example, like a tribe in Africa that was on their ancestral diet, and then Europeans came in and introduced grains to them, and the that's the first time that they ever had any sort of like obesity, cavities, genetic issues, health issues that they had never seen before. And the wild beasts, right? If we're hungry, every time the so I'm reading. I stopped to read Todd's thing.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
will eat the flesh of bulls and drink the. I would take that. For every beast in the forest is mine, the cattle upon thousands. Yeah, he's just yeah.
Mhm.
So
It's biblical, man.
yeah, so I think that they are inherently don't want to be eaten, and I believe that other species when they eat a diet that's not appropriate to them, they have extreme deformations. I think obesity is a deformation, and I think that sugar literally deforms you by making you fat. We're so used to fat people that we don't consider somebody who's deformed, but it is someone who was like
Don't you
500 pounds.
fat shame. Don't you fat shame.
Yeah, I'm not shaming them. I feel like if, for example, if you were blown up by an, IED or sorry, IED, uh, EID, sorry. That
Yeah.
would be horrible if you're blown up by an IED. But,
Oh gosh.
uh, if you were blown up and your leg was blown off, that would be a deformation. I
Mhm.
don't shame you for that. As a matter of fact, I commend you, you know what I mean, for that having happened. But the thing is that obesity is a deformation, and that sucks
Mhm.
that the fattest man ever, the he used to be part of the circus back
Yes.
in the day, right? You know that picture of that guy who was like 400 pounds and people came from all over the world to see this dude who was so fat. Now that's like the regular. I would see that guy in the South every single day and not
Mhm.
even think
Yeah.
as being deformed. And it's a great way to think of it. New perspective for sure. Thank you.
Okay.
And so I think we're for example, if cocaine was causing you to be deformed, that would be an extreme advocate right off the bat to like this drug is deforming you. But
Mhm.
because it's sugar and it's indoctrinated to our society, we just consider it normal.
Normal. Yeah. Well, and because it hasn't been demonized like other things have. You know what I mean? Meat's being demonized right now. And I mean,
Yeah.
if if vegans hate meat so much, why do they keep trying to replicate meat out of vegetables? Like, just eat the friggin' meat, man. Like, just eat the meat. And I agree with you. I don't know if you've read this book, Good Energy by Casey Means. Very, very
Yeah.
interesting because when you look at the natural animal kingdoms like the lion kingdom and that sort of thing, you don't see morbidly obese lions. You don't. You see healthy, lean, thriving, lions. They don't have they're not born with like cleft palates or missing ears or missing tails or missing limbs and stuff like that. Like they're just out there eating their natural diet in their natural
Yeah.
habitat, untouched. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
we're lions, but I think that there's a lot of merit to what you're saying. And I mean, we could talk about this all day, but I really want to ask you, Chad,
Yeah.
uh, can you talk a little bit about carnivore and families, carnivore
Yeah.
and kids? Because I love your perspective on this, and I would really like to hear you share it.
Absolutely. So, as a father of 4 and realizing how bad it is, it kind of makes me sad when I see other parents. They're like, "Well, I do it, but I don't really force it on my kids." Man, I don't know if like your kids were being poisoned by arsenic, wouldn't you immediately remove that from their life and be like, "Well, I removed the arsenic from my life, but not my kids." And so it's considered to be extreme now to not poison your kids.
Mhm,
And so it's weird that so I have my kids um on a carnivore diet, and every once in a while, so that way they know um and I'm not completely removing them from society, I'll allow them to have like I'll allow them to cheat on the diet or whatever. So for example, if they have a birthday party coming up, like if it's a birthday party, I'll tell them like, yes, you can have within reason, you can and participate, but like I would prefer you not to eat like candy. You know what I
mhm.
mean? If it's like a cake, yeah, take part in the cake. If there's pizza, fine. And what's funny is they just had one of these parties and everyone was fighting for the toilet because they were all having the hardest time. And it was funny. My one daughter, who usually gives me the most resistance, was like, I can see now why that food is not good for us. I don't ever want to go through that again.
Mhm, mhm,
So it it's cool that they now have, since they've been eating so healthy, that when they do have food that is without that, they feel how their body becomes dysregulated. They're not paying attention to the fact that their body is regulated. So the cattle on 1,000 hills for
yeah,
your health. Oh, snap. How
yeah.
old are your children, Chad? My children are 7, 9, 10, and 15.
Wow. 7,
So
15. Is it 2 boys, 2 girls?
2 boys, 2 girls. The oldest and the youngest are boys, and the 2 Irish twins are girls.
Oh, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, they are nightmares to one another. But,
Oh,
yeah,
we'll be best friends later, I'm sure.
I hope so. But the idea, though, is to know what is happening to our kids, to know what is happening to the food industry, and to continue to feed that to your kids, I believe is we're still so influenced by society that we kind of feel that stigma of not allowing your kids to eat whatever they want. And I think that's horrible for your kids. I believe right now there's a study that shows that conservative kids who grow up in conservative households have significantly less anxiety than kids who grow up in democratic or liberal households, and the mental health problems that exist within each are uh, polarized. And one of the reasons that they theorize that that's the case is because usually in conservative households, there's more rules, there's more strictness, there's more like, hey, that's not allowed. Regulate your emotion, bring it in. There's work to do, or rather, it's like it's not about your emotions; it's about getting up from your emotions, rather than validating every single emotion and justifying them. And so when there's lack of emotional regulation as a kid, this
Mhm,
can have extremely detrimental effects. And so you say you are a kid, you don't have the mental maturity to make certain decisions. And
mhm.
so I make rules that are very strict. And then they become more lenient as you get older and you start to understand.
And you start to build
And
responsibility and
exactly. And so as you understand the world more, as you understand yourself more, as you understand society more, we can broaden these things in a healthy way. And
mhm,
I do not believe in protecting your kids whatsoever, but I believe in keeping them safe to a certain sense where it's like allow your kids to do dangerous things in a safe environment. So
Yeah.
for example, like jujitsu and climbing and playgrounds and stuff, it's like put yourself in a spot where you have to overcome a fear, whether
Yeah.
that's a fear of heights or fear of falling, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So fear of fighting or fear of conflict. And so that's why I believe in martial arts a lot. So as we go through that, I believe the same thing for our physical health. It is your job to protect your kids
Mhm.
from poisons and other things. And so when they're, especially when they're kids, um, I I'm saying you just no, there's no option. This is the way you eat. And if we're at a social event, I'll decide whether or not it's it's okay if for you to cheat on your diet, and that's my call as your parent. Just like it's my call for plenty of other things in their life. Do you want to drive a car? I don't care. It's my call to say no. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
you also have the final say, being the man
yeah,
of the home, the head of the household, you have final say. So you're not even gonna bring that stuff into the house, let
right,
alone,
exactly.
like, and so if it's not even in the house, they don't have access to it. Some of your older kids are getting to that age where they could potentially have access to it, but like you said, you wanna raise them to a certain standard where you start to give them that leniency where they can build
Exactly.
trust and be like, "How far can I go?" And how far can I experiment and where can I still make decisions so I do have some freedom and some leniency, but also, like this is my comfort zone is like my dad's parameters that he has provided for me, my father's parameters. He's provided these for me as a safety net. Like this is where I need to start from, and now I feel safe enough to do that. And I love that you guys are not only looking at this from like a physiological standpoint, but you're also looking at the emotional side of things too. And I don't want to share your story for you, but I know that you guys own a business, and I know that you guys both get to be kind of more at home with your kids one on one, which I think is such a missing piece for so many people. Like we talked about at the beginning of the show, people are so quick to just like send off to daycare so they can go back to work so they can afford the daycare, or like they have to work two jobs because, you know, inflation is so insane right now. People can't afford to stay at home, but it's like there are choices that you can make where you can live within your means and downsize things and downscale things. So maybe you can, maybe you don't get to go on that Florida vacation once a year, but you get to be at home with your kids, which is the priority. And I think in raising that next generation, because I'm getting there too. I've got a little guy that's going to be 1 in December. In looking forward to raising that next generation, we have to lead our families in a way that we can feel that they're going to be successful down the road. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to build my kids up to fail. I
Hmm.
know they're going to fail, and it's going to be hard for me to watch that. But like, and that's when that'll be when they're confident enough to move and live on their own and that sort of thing. Like, I know that they're going to fail at things. I still fail at things, and nobody is
Hmm.
perfect. But I love that you guys have this like construct for your children, and it's like when you get to that age, you know, then you can make those decisions. But until then, you're my house, my rules kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. So like my 15-year-old, it's my goal to treat my 14 and 15-year-olds uh like adults.
Mhm.
So I believe there's a reason why a bat mitzvah happens at what, 13 years old. It's in our genetics that we became adults at like 13, 14, 15-year olds. You know how many 14-year-olds have gone off and fought wars back in the day, and how many 14-year-olds were raising farms and having kids, and how many 13-year-old girls when they had they call it the first blood, right? When they had their period for the first time, like, oh, it's time to get married, let's get you a good guy who's going to protect you and start raising kids.
Mhm.
That, like, these people were making life decisions at that age. And so what I try to do within the realm of my household where I have dictation is I try to treat them like adults. So I tell, like, inside my house, like, we're not bringing garbage food inside the house. But if you have your own money and you go out, like he goes out with his girlfriend and stuff, I'm like, you can choose to do whatever you want with that, but know that it's going to cause this.
Yeah.
Know if you don't want your skin to break out, avoid this. And so now he's got like the full education of of what I've like kind of provided and learned. He's seen me suffer. And so he consciously makes as good decisions as he can. And then he kind of participates the way he needs to.
Mhm.
And what's really cool is I see him doing a lot of things on his own now. Like
Mhm.
I don't have to bother him. He'll go out and sit in the sun for a while or go for a walk on his own. And he's doing these things on his own as a 15-year-old that are good for him. And I don't have to prompt him. He just knows they're good for him. I
Yeah.
know that he like ate pizza the other day and with his girlfriend and ice cream, and he was like on the toilet and his face was breaking out, and he's like, I don't know if that was worth it. And
Yeah.
so the thing is, we are now I'm allowing him to make his own mistakes, but he's making his mistakes based on the proper education I provided for him. And
Mhm.
now he's making the connection between gut and mental health, gut and physical digestion issues, gut and skin breaking out.
Mhm.
And he's seen me recover from all these things. So now he knows. So he's consciously aware. So when he makes these mistakes, he's making them as a conscious, aware, like adult in a sense, or as an independent individual. And
Yeah.
he's the one who's learning back and forth. And I like that. And so as my daughters, they're learning that too. Like they went to a birthday party on Saturday and they had a great old time. They had pizza and ice cream. And then the next day, they were tired. They were having meltdowns. They were arguing. And then I sat them all down. I was like, do you guys see your behavior? Is
Yep.
this normal behavior for you? Do you
Exactly.
think this is related to the fact that you ate something? And they all were like, yeah, I'm tired and cranky. And
Yep.
like I kind of like,
Right? Crap.
I was, I was like, what do you think? I was like, what do you think? The only thing that changed was this. But here's the other cool thing is that it became ceremonial in a sense that celebratory, I guess I should say,
Yeah.
that they were so excited that I said yes, that they could eat junk food and stuff for this birthday party. The amount of excitement, they've been to a lot of birthday parties, but the amount of excitement that they had for this birthday party that they were going to be able to do this and participate and eat pizza, I
Mhm.
have never seen them so excited. And so I think it's like they say the best seasoning is starvation, right? And
Mm.
so I think kids have so much and so much stimulus and so much garbage that's influencing their lives on a day-to-day basis that when you remove that and then they're aware that they're going to get rewarded at the end of the week for like they were the best behaved kids for that week. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I was like, hey, if you do anything out of line, if you're missing any assignments, you know what I mean, whatever, like you are not going to that. And they were they were the best kids that have ever existed.
But they also have the capacity for that because they're
Yeah.
not on a blood sugar roller coaster.
Exactly. But it was just cool to see how excited they were because other birthday parties, I've seen them be excited, but not like this because they knew that it was going to be that special because like kids,
That gave us
people,
permission.
yeah, because parents are just shoving processed foods and chemicals and sugar down their kids' throat constantly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just constantly. So when they go to a birthday party, it's like fun to hang out with your friends, but it's like they almost have that kind of garbage all the time. And so for our kids, for them to participate and indulge, not only did that make them so excited, it made it that much more meaningful and impactful to them. And then the results of what that diet did to them and how it affected them was that much more impactful. And
Yeah.
they were able to make that relation because they knew the only thing that was different was
What?
that diet, the change up. So I thought I like it. I don't believe in the 80-20 rule. A lot of people believe in the 80-20 rule. I believe in being extremely strict. And then when you allow yourself to uh, diverge from that path, pay very close attention. And if
Mhm.
it does things that are better for you or worse for you, pay very close attention, you know?
We have a question from Ellie. I'm going to put it up on the board here. What are some typical meals that you feed your children? They avoid snacking. Do you guys do the same?
Yeah. We have a hard rule that we don't eat before 11 a.m. We don't really believe in snacking at all. And we also don't have food that's prepared. And I think that's the easiest. It's like if we're hungry, we have to cook something up. We
Mhm.
have to wait, we have to anticipate. A
Mhm.
lot of people don't know this, but over I think or at 20% of your digestive acids are released before food is even in your body. So like preparing your food, smelling your food, touching your food, These are our sensory inputs that allow us to start the digestive process, anticipation of eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's very interesting is when we eat processed foods, we don't touch it. Our body doesn't even know it's food until it's in our body. It's now 20% behind. And it's like, oh, now I have to start digesting things. It wasn't introduced or into your digestive system properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them, it's good for kids to be hungry. It's very, very good for kids to be hungry. It's very good for adults to be hungry. It's not good for them to starve, but
No.
it's good for them to be hungry.
Yes.
Right. And so for us, it's like, okay, it's time to eat. Everybody hungry enough. We are all going to cook together. And so then you cook, they anticipate, they know what's coming, they're involved in the process. And then we all eat until we're extremely full. And then we'll kind of, when I say snack on that, it's like our eating window is like, let's say 6-hour eating window from when we start eating. It's like you can just continuously eat that. And then if we need to make more, we'll make more, and we'll just eat until we're so stuffed. And then we'll drink as much water as we can. And when I say as much water, I'm not like drowning them. It's just like drink as much as you can. Because I think a lot of people don't realize the relationship between hydration and eating. So anyway, we drink a bunch, and then we go watch a movie, and then usually by that time it starts getting to evening, and then they pass out, and then they wake up the next morning, and it's easy. They don't constantly need food. We like when you look this up, you look up our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and you're like, food wasn't around all the time. Babies are extremely malleable, and they're extremely adaptive. And there's this thing called epigenetics, and certain genetic expressions turn on and off based on the environment that you're in. And babies and little kids are the best at this.
Mm-hmm.
They are extremely positive. They are extremely excited about everything. Even when you're in a horrible situation, they always find the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
My buddy just recently, he didn't have enough money to pay his electricity. And so his electricity turned off. And so they're like, when they went into the fridge to get something, it's like, open the door real quick, shut it. And all the kids were like, it's like camping. And they were all excited about the candles and lighting a fire and all this stuff. And they didn't have any negative connotations with it. Like, they were just like, oh, this happened. And like, they're excited about the change, the things that were different, the things that went against the monogamous art, not monogamous. What's the word I'm looking for? Monotony of lifestyle and monotonous lifestyle. So anyway, kids they don't know. You know what I mean? Oftentimes, if you
they don't know.
Yeah, like they don't know that. They don't know what you don't know exactly, but it's like if you never told your kids that you were poor, let's say you were poor, and you never told them that you were poor, like they would probably it would take them a while, to a certain age to be like, oh, we don't have as much money as other people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're just living their best life wherever they're at with the toys that are in front of them, with whatever's in front of them, and they make the best happen. Whether it's, I see the brattiest kids have the nicest technology in front of their face, mm-hmm. and they always think they need the next best thing. So anyway, moving on from that, kids don't know, like kids and babies were on a fasting, feasting diet from the beginning of humanity. And if, for example, people around the world who don't have enough money to feed their kids and they go days without eating, Child Protective Services aren't going to those houses and removing those parents and children from one another. It's just a reality for them. It's a reality for them that they can't eat for sometimes days at a time, and they're trying to do their best to fix that. Mm-hmm. However, those kids are not dying. Mm-hmm. In fact, most of them have, a lot of them, in a study I was looking at, have better metabolic health markers than our kids who are eating all the time. Oh. And they're not skinny. So it's very interesting.
You're also comparing a society and a culture that's like raw and natural to a society and culture that's hyper processed and hyper pharmaceuticalized.
Exactly. Yeah. But if you told somebody, if you told somebody my kids only have a 6 hour eating window, which oftentimes gets manipulated to 8 hours because we go do jujitsu or other things and we have to come back.
Yeah.
But if you told them that, they were like, "You're not feeding your kids enough."
Uh,
And you know what I mean? So I like, no, they are definitely getting the caloric intake that they need.
mhm.
These little animals feast
Yeah.
when we eat.
That's the point. And I think that's kind of where the mark gets missed, right? Like Ellie's question was so great about asking about snacking and stuff because we're in a society where snacking is the normal. You know, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, your kid's hungry. Just give them a snack, give them a snack, give them a snack, give them a snack. And most of those snacks come out of a bag or out of a box or something like that. Not in all cases, but many cases, you know, and I'm guilty of that. I give my little guy chicharrones, like pork rinds, or if I'm out and about, like I'll give him like a meat stick or something like that. You know, if I can't feed him, like breastfeed him at that moment because I'm still breastfeeding. If I can't breastfeed him at that moment, you know, I'll give him something from a package, which is not ideal, but oftentimes I'll bring something with me, like, you know, I'll bring like a hamburger patty for him or some like cut up steak or something like that. But you know, he's at that age where different textures are ideal for him. So having the chicharrone, it's crunchy, and then having the meat stick because it's cylindrical and he can hang on to it, and it, you know, he enjoys that. And then having the burger patty, and then having a piece of bacon. You know, like I try and offer him variety in that sense, and I don't limit his eating window. Obviously, he's an infant. He needs what he needs in order to develop, and every child is so different. Like my guy is a serial nurser; he nurses every 5 minutes, whereas some kids they. When I have a friend like this, her daughter is younger than my son by 3 months, and she gets offended if she offers her the breast. She's like, "What? Get away from me! Like I'll let you know when I'm hungry," kind of thing. Which is very interesting because like you can't force feed a baby. You cannot force nurse a baby. Like if they're hungry, they'll nurse. If they're not hungry, they'll let you know they don't want it, which is so cool because I think what you were kind of getting to and alluding to is that we get disconnected from our hunger and our satiety cues. We don't know what
Mhm.
it feels like to be hungry anymore because we just think about food, or you know, our emotional needs are going unmet, or we're having a stressful day and we're just like, we just automatically we're like, I just need to eat. I just need food. I just need a snack. I just need. And it's like, well, what do you actually
Yeah.
need? Do you actually need the food, or do you need a hug? You know, because
uh,
I think for kids, you know, it's not always the case that they need a hug, but sometimes it is. Sometimes they just need a freaking hug, and I think people need to hug their kids more. I
oh
really
yeah,
do.
for sure.
Yeah.
I think I hug my kids way too much. They hate it. One totally forgot you were Canadian until I was reminded when you said big.
Mm-hmm.
That threw me back to be like, oh yeah, that's right. She's Canadian. I haven't heard big in a while. Big
Yeah.
northerner. uh, And then I remember when I was in Alaska, everyone kept saying big. I was like, what bag? They're saying bag. And I
Oh,
was like,
how I say bag?
yeah,
Bag to you?
yeah. The accent, yeah. And
Oh,
then,
accent.
yeah, exactly. And then, what was I going to say about food? Yeah. Uh, I think that I think it's, we have gotten into this thing that children are so valuable. And yes, they are. They
Mhm,
are so valuable. But you have to also consider children are like resilient. You know how many cultures, especially that they exist today, but that have been around for a long time, that wouldn't name their kids until they reach their second birthday because the infant and toddler rate was like so high
oh, wow.
that
The
yeah, because
mortality rate?
yeah, the mortality rate in like in
Oh,
past
interesting. I never heard
yeah.
that.
So like you know, this thing of having like 12 kids, it was like, yeah, you might have 12 kids, but only 3 of them or 4 of them would make it to adulthood
Mm,
because it was so rough, right? And because you know, winters or disease or whatnot.
mhm,
So we got into this day and age where we like kids are so fragile. They're so fragile.
mhm.
And I don't buy into that whatsoever. It's like your kid's hungry. Mom, I'm hungry. Oh, I need to stop whatever I'm doing and to be your slave and to get you food right now. It's like, okay, noted. When we get food, we'll get food. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely important for kids to face adversity. Be hungry for a little bit.
Mhm.
I can go look up and see a kid right now who hasn't eaten in 2 days. They're still getting by. And I bet that last meal wasn't exactly the most fulfilling meal ever. And I
Mhm.
know you just ate a ton not too long ago. So
Yeah.
you will be okay and you will survive if you don't eat for an hour. Like let's say we're not going to be home until we get there. Like we're not going to be home for an hour. You will be hungry for an hour until we get home. So that's that. If you need to walk a certain amount, it's like, well, then you need to walk a certain amount. Like if there it was you were like what's it called? Dying of thirst, and there was clean water a mile away, and you were barefoot, and I guarantee you would walk barefoot to get that water, right? And
Mhm.
so the idea is, it's like you got to start putting your kids through adversity to make sure that they can handle an adverse environment, that
Mhm.
they have an adverse, they have a diverse set of skills, that they, regardless of what happens to them in life, that they can adapt and overcome and they can handle it.
Mhm.
The Stoics have this big thing about actively seeking out discomfort. So, for example, like I didn't touch warm water for a month, for 28 days. And so it was hilarious because like maybe a couple weeks after that, the water heater broke and I was completely fine because I was like, "Oh, I'm used to taking cold showers." And everybody else was having meltdowns. And
Yeah.
for me, I was enjoying the cold
Yeah.
showers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? Like I can go 5 days without eating. And
Mhm.
so if it's like I'm traveling and people are like, "Well, how do you travel on carnivore?" Well, if there's good food to eat, then eat that. If there's not, just don't eat. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? You become resilient to this world where people would normally be like falling apart. And
Mhm.
I love the fact that you can become that person.
Mhm.
Anybody can become that person who's resilient against anything,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
have
I
you ever tried sleeping on the floor without a blanket for an extended amount of time?
Mhm.
Like go a month. Yeah, but I'm saying it's like you could. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're not freaking out about having a bed. You can end up sleeping anywhere. It's
Yeah.
hilarious. Like you're in your car, you can sleep anywhere. Like on a road trip or something. You don't need a $150 hotel with all the Wi-Fi, and you just get by.
Yeah. You
Like
figured it out.
I just had a road trip recently, and it was like it was very easy to not eat the whole time, to
Mhm.
sleep wherever we landed, and to be okay wherever I was, and um be okay like being alone. And most people, that would have been hundreds of dollars by the time that they got there, and
Yeah.
they still, it would have been rough for them, where
Yeah.
for me it was kind of exciting to do something different. So
But you're
I want
kind of
go
also
ahead.
approach things to in my opinion, you kind of approach things from how they would have done it a couple hundred years ago. When it was like horse and wagon before we had cars and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Like you're that's how I think too. I'm like, what did they do 200 years ago? When it comes to giving birth and stuff like that. Uh, they wouldn't have had access to formula. They wouldn't have had access to multiple rooms necessarily. Your heat source might have just been, one wood stove or one fireplace, and everybody would have slept together on the floor with one blanket or one sheepskin or whatever. And like everything was contained in a smaller space. And now it's like everything is bigger and everything is more spaced out. And like your kids are all the way across to the other side of the house, so you're completely disconnected there. And then they're on technology, which disconnects them further. And
Hmm.
anyway, I don't want to get on
I
a tangent about that, but I think it's important to recognize um, like you said, the resiliency and also the need for connection. I think that that's a really big missing piece for
Oh
all
yeah, for
families.
sure.
Mhm.
Community, connection, purpose, I would say, is the biggest one. The best question to ever answer is when to resist and when to persist.
Yeah.
Once you once you can figure that out, and this is the thing, is everyone will take the convenience all the time. Everyone thinks their life is so hard and they're such a victim. Then, like you said, and this is kind of like a dog. It's a little bit of a dig right here, and to dog on mothers. I feel I catch flack for this, but I was like, I believe that the reason you use formula is because there's an that's it is an option. What, like you said, what would have happened 2 years ago if your baby wasn't latching,
Yeah.
or if you weren't producing milk or whatever? You would have found a way.
You would have found
You
a way.
weren't gonna, yeah. And some people might
It's
say
just not
like,
a thing.
yeah, exactly. But people say you would have found the formula, like maybe formula's finding the way. And it's like, I don't buy into that. That all the garbage that's in formula,
Mhm.
I only have one baby that was fed pretty much mostly formula. And that baby, I love her to death. She's awesome. But when it comes to eyesight, she's our only one that can't see. She
Oh,
has hearing problems. She has, she's
yeah.
awesome. She's an athlete. She's my best jujitsu athlete, to be honest. But all my other kids have perfect eyesight, perfect hearing, perfect like bill of health and everything. But she was the only one that had those problems. So
Mm.
that might be just a coincidence, but
I mean,
it's
at this point, who knows? And I mean, we can speculate
exactly.
all we want.
It's speculation, but
Yeah.
it's like in my own head, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
of course, of course.
I wonder, and like my wife and I I'll talk about that all the time. If it was a couple hundred years ago, it's like, what would you have done? You have probably been eating a heavy red meat based diet already, but what would you have done in order to make sure that your kid wasn't fed garbage? Worst case scenarios, you would have went to the dairy guy and got some raw dairy. You know
Mhm,
what I mean? But I'm saying it's like you would have found the best option for your kid because that was the only option. The fact that you have an easy out
mhm.
is the reason why you take the easy out.
Well,
And I
and it's
think that
also
you're
you can get it via prescription, from what I understand here in the US,
wow. But I
which is
yeah,
terrifying.
I just guess that a lot of people are weaker than they are, like stronger than they're allowing themselves to be. They
Mhm,
just take the easiest route possible. And we're so much stronger than that. And you said it was a couple hundred years ago, 50 years ago. My wife's mother,
mhm,
their family lived on a farm and was a little bit more poor. They had an outhouse.
mhm,
And if you had to go to the bathroom, guess what you had to do? You had to go to the outhouse. And it was winter, and she once slipped and she like got her teeth knocked out just trying to go to the bathroom at nighttime.
yeah. See?
Right.
So it's so different, so different.
So like I'm talking about one generation removed. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Uh your conveniences, you just take the easiest option. The reason you don't go outside, the reason that you would rather take a pill than change your diet and lifestyle is because it's the easiest option. And I think it's such a disservice to our kids. I think it's such a disservice to our family, allowing the government to get involved. And I believe the most important, the most sacred thing is the family centric model.
yep,
And the government's getting involved, the careers getting involved, finances are getting involved. I could go and move my family right now to a cabin that I'll build with my own two hands out in the woods. You know what I mean? And
mhm,
I will do that
yep,
before I start chasing careers and sending my kids off to school. Like to me, family centric values are so important now. It
yeah,
is my primary method to anything. I gave up. I used to make good money. I made significantly good money for me. It was more money than I thought I would ever make.
mhm,
And I gave that up because I was not around my family nearly enough. My life was falling apart. My mental health was falling apart. My marriage was strained to the nth degree. My
mhm,
kids, I barely got to see them, and they were starting to embody certain behaviors that I did not like. And I was
mhm,
saying, I realized this is my own fault.
yep,
This is my own. I can make decisions. And once my wife got on board, it was game over. She's more minimalist than I am. She's like, let's move wherever, let's move somewhere new. Let's do something else. It doesn't matter about the money. People who are homeless and make no money and who are bankrupt eat every single day and they're still obese. So like there's an overfeeding problem in this country. No one's starving in this country. So like it's not like I quit my job, I'm going to start starving tomorrow. There's a way to always have money
right,
and or not money, a way to always have food. And so my goal was from now on, all my finances go into building memories with my kids and making sure that we're having a healthy diet, no matter where that is, no matter how that happens, basically. And so as a carnivore dad, that is my priority. And what's very interesting is something that you were talking about is my wife and I have a completely different dynamic. She has this tattoo. I give her crap all the time, but it says she flies with her own wings, but it's like in Latin. And I'm
yeah.
like, oh, Miss Independent over there. You know, like um, but yeah, she went from being like, I can do everything on my own to be like, no, I want a relationship that is and they started even putting a negative connotation on this codependent.
Yeah,
And which by the way, I understand that codependency is technically a bad phrase, but the term itself, codependent, I like that where it's like I depend on you to have kids and you depend on me to have kids. We both need each other. I
exactly.
depend on you to provide nurturing environment for my kids, and you depend on me to provide security. There's no way.
And yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, we have a codependency. We could not raise our kids the way we could if we didn't have one another. And if you are a single parent, I'm not bashing you, but I just know studies have already shown that a two like we talked, leadership household, men and women, raise the healthiest children. Not to say you can't have an optimized child if you're a single mother or a widow or something like that, but I say what to thrive for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, for example, I can watch Tiger Woods go hit a golf ball,
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to go do that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like, of course, that's what I'm gonna strive to do. Am I gonna achieve that? No. But the thing is, have something to strive for. And I believe that a more traditional household that has kind of been developed over thousands of years naturally,
Mhm.
in a sense of what we need physiologically, biologically, evolutionarily, all the things socially, I think is extremely good for our kids. And my wife has come to be that too. And so now all of a sudden overnight, it feels like my wife went from being this one individual to like a trad wife, like
Yes.
this freaking hot blonde who does carnivore and jujitsu, and she could strangle you, but at the same time can dress up and
Yeah.
doll up, in terms of like wearing a sundress. She doesn't wear makeup, which I'm so happy about, but uh, like she can be everything from A to Z of this freaking awesome like trophy slash trad wife, and provide and be strong while at the same time being vulnerable and needing me and submitting to me.
Yeah.
And I know people here submit to your husband, but I submit to her. I submit to her in a lot of ways. And like I said, it's a sense of codependency that I absolutely love. So
Yeah.
I love it. I love everything about our marriage right now. I love everything about our family right now. I love everything, everything, everything. And I think it all started when I saw Paul Saladino getting screamed at by an overweight woman who was very angry
Yeah.
and
A malnourished
telling
woman at that. Because you're overweight doesn't mean you're not malnourished.
yeah, exactly. And I was just saying, like, she's supposed to be what we're supposed to idolize to become her.
Mm-mm.
She's the one who has it figured out. She's the
Yeah.
one who's mean and yelling on this TV in front of millions of people at this guy who's trying to help other people. He's just trying to get a platform. And I was like, you, you're telling everyone what's healthy and what's good for you. And this guy who seems to be older in shape and a doctor, like
Yeah. I'm gonna
you're,
take this advice. The proof is in your pudding.
yeah.
And your presentation, you know what I mean?
And just by watching her scorn him and ridicule him led to this result of us becoming a more traditional family and willing to minimalize and not need a big house and not need a big car.
Yeah.
And we do like we invest in our health first, and then everything else becomes secondary.
Yeah. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. Chad, I'm going to have to wrap us up here, but I wanted to ask if you could rattle off your top tips for someone who's considering a carnivore lifestyle.
Yeah. One, shut up and do it. Sorry.
That sounds like a
um,
direct order, sir.
it's seriously, it's like, stop messing around with it, play with it. The limbo, I believe, is going to be the hardest thing if you keep holding on to a little bit of carbs, because when your body's not completely fat adapted, it's going to try to get run as much energy off glucose as it can. And so if you're not giving it a lot of glucose and you're like not a lot of carbs and you're mostly eating fat, your body is kind of in this weird sense where it's running off of very low amount of fuel. So it's like go in or don't. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And if you want to be healthy, you like, what's the worst case scenario is you try something for 30 to 60 days. And if it doesn't work, fine. You're going to have a lot of problems. Like getting off carb addiction is horrible. So just know that when you go into this, it's not going to be great. When you go through transitions in life and growth periods, it's growing pains. They literally have the phase growing pains. And when you're growing in your digestion, know that your digestive system needs to catch back up to becoming fat adapted to digesting proteins and fats. Your gallbladder probably needs to get back with it and pumping enough what's it called, bile in order to emulsify that amount of fat in order for energy. So no, that's going to take time. And the thing is, you don't really do this in kind of like short little baby steps. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, people ask about increasing their energy, and they're like, they're waiting for more energy in order to be able to do more things. And I say your body's only going to produce the amount of energy that your environment requires. So if your day is not doing anything and just sitting around the house, then your body's only going to produce enough energy to do that. And no wonder you feel tired when you have to do something extra than that.
Mhm.
Instead, start creating an environment that requires a lot of energy. So, for example, if you're walking 5 miles a day or doing resistance training or doing jujitsu or something like that, then your body has to match that energy level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so what I would say is create the environment that your body has to adapt to, and that's going to be difficult at first, and no one's questioning that. But
Mhm.
just know that uh, this is going to be the. I haven't met a single person yet who's gone carnivore or animal based and like turned back. I'm sure there are people who have, but every single person I've talked to has reversed so many issues, but also got to a place where they were thriving. And they never realized how bad they were until they got to a place of
Right.
thriving. So,
Right.
um, my thing is, it's changed my life. It's changed a lot of people's lives. I hope the best for you in whatever decision that you make, but I say don't do it half-assed. You got to go. You got to go full send on something like this, and you have to give your body. You have to give yourself the discipline and the intention to do it for a specific amount of time without cheating in order to give it a proper chance. So that's my advice.
Awesome. And Chad, how can people find you? How can they connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram and YouTube, combat.carnivore. I'll give you a link. I think I already sent you a link, Rochelle.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
put it all in the description box.
yeah. And so that's just my link tree. I didn't, my link tree has all my things on it. So I have an online jujitsu community. So if you're thinking about getting started with jujitsu, I have a full intro course that takes you from beginning to end. We have the Steak and Butter Gang, obviously. So links in there to get you involved in the Steak and Butter Gang. So that's an intro to Carnivore, and a lot of great voices in there and great advice. And it was nice to go in there and just ask questions like, did anybody else experience this? And then, like, right off the bat, a bunch of people answering, like, yes, I did. Here's what I did to help with it.
Yeah.
And then I have merchandise if you ever want it. It's called Make Veterans Great Again, and you'll see in that. So if you want to help me with my mission to help veterans who have PTSD, right now 22 vets a day are committing suicide. 135 people in the United States a day are committing suicide. 68% of those are white men, and you're 4 times more likely to commit suicide as a man than if you're a woman. Not to say that women don't have mental health issues, but we obviously see by these numbers that men are disenfranchised. And so if you want to contact me more about that, or you want to support the cause, please buy a rash guard or a shirt or a hat that's Make Veterans Great Again. And that would mean a lot to me. And we're using those proceeds right now to help get the message out. So that's me in a handbasket.
I love it. And I actually want to finish with this scripture just because you were talking about people starving and not having access to stuff. But it's in Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 26. It says, "Look at the birds of the air, for they neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? So why do you worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say to you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now, if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows what you need, and that you need all these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its
Yes,
own trouble. Awesome.
that's absolutely perfect.
Yep.
Every bit of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being my guest, and we got to do this again because I really enjoyed talking to you, and there's just so much to talk about and so much to unpack. So I would love to have you back if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, whenever you want to schedule it, send me an email and I'll say if the date's good and then we'll do it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you guys got something out of this. If you didn't, maybe you didn't stick around long enough because this is jam packed. But go give Chad a follow, combat.carnivore on
Yep.
Instagram and on YouTube. Check him out, you guys. He's awesome and he's really making changes and waves. So definitely keep up on his story. But for now,
Thank you so
Tell the
much.
Real Life Carnivore signing out. Did I do